Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just starting to get people into the room here, and really excited to see you and get this hour started. Thank you for joining us today and welcoming back birds with this special Support Birds All Summer Long live event. We actually have a parallel stream going over on YouTube that we're just getting up and running right now. Thank you for joining. Perfect. So we'll stay here for a minute or two, enjoy the sounds of this wonderful dawn chorus as we welcome people into the Zoom room and into YouTube. And I want to remind you, if you enjoy these kinds of live events that we're sharing together, if you enjoy watching great footage of birds and sharing it with other people, please consider supporting the Lab of Ornithology. It's your support that lets us be able to put on events like this and help provide all these great resources to the world. And you can donate or become a member online at birds.cornell.edu. There'll be some links in the chat for that. We do have several people helping in the chat in both Zoom and on YouTube. So thank you, Ben, Matt, and Janice. If you have questions and you're watching, please use the Q&A feature if you're in Zoom, and we'll get to as many as we can, both in the chat and in the Q&A. And of course, given how many people have registered for this event, we're probably not going to be able to get to every single question, but hopefully a lot of questions are answered and a lot of joy is really shared during this hour that we'll spend together. Okay, we're a couple minutes in. I'm going to go ahead and kill our screen share. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live event today celebrating birds, welcoming them back. We've been welcoming them back for several months now, and I'm excited to share this time with you. My name is Charles Eldermire. I'm from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I'll be your host for today's conversation with three special guests from the Cornell Lab who we'll welcome in just a moment. Um, I also want to mention that we are giving away a free Nests and Eggs Bird Academy course to two lucky attendees, and everyone who is registered will receive a 50% off coupon for a discount on the course at Bird Academy. So if you haven't registered, there's also a link in the chat where you can make sure that you're registered and make sure that you get access to both that and all the follow-up materials that we're going to send you afterwards so you can stay connected with birds. All right, well, let's get started and bring in our guest speakers today. If everybody can turn their cameras on from our panelists. Perfect. I see two and I see three. That's great. So we finally get to be four people on screen at the same time. These are going to be our expert voices today from the Lab of Ornithology, here to welcome back birds right alongside you. And it's my pleasure to introduce the Cornell Lab's Garden for Birds project leader, Becca Rodomsky-Bish, as well as Nestwatch's project leader, Robyn Bailey, and my colleague in communications, Ileana Betancourt, to our event today. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. Good morning.
Um, Becca, I don't know if you want to start, maybe just tell a little about what you do at the lab and what gets you excited this time of year, birds outside, all that.
Sure. As Charles said, I am the project leader for Garden for Birds at the lab. I'm also the project leader for the Great Backyard Bird Count, which happens in February. And this time of year, I am in my gardens as much as possible after work, sometimes before work, both enjoying the birds and the plants that I love to tend to.
Awesome. How about you, Robyn?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Robyn Bailey, and as Charles mentioned, I'm the project leader for Nestwatch here at the Lab of Ornithology. I have been studying nesting birds for about 20 years, 15 of those here at the Lab of Ornithology, and it just never gets boring. This time of year is so exciting for me because you have birds in all stages of nesting, from eggs to small nestlings to fledglings, and I love getting to interact with people all over the world and share their excitement for the nests around them.
That's awesome. I couldn't agree with all of those sentiments more. This is a really exciting part of the year. How about you, Ileana?
Hi everyone, my name's Ileana. Like Charles said, I work on the communications and marketing team at the lab, helping to bring all the great things that the lab does to you and the world. And I enjoy birds, I enjoy gardening, I enjoy watching birds, enjoy my garden, and I'm excited to be here alongside my colleagues to talk about this awesome topic of enjoying birds this summer. So thank you.
Thanks, Ileana. And as I mentioned, I'm Charles Eldermire. I'm a live media producer here at the lab. I love birds. I love being outside, and I love connecting with other people that that enjoy birds. And this is a fun group to be a part of today. So thank you guys for joining me. I also want to say to everybody out there in the audience, you can throw questions in the chat. We also like to hear what you're seeing. We like to hear about what you're excited about. If you're into gardening for birds, if you're into different ways to help birds where you live, feel free to share that in the chat. It's a place where people can learn. We're not the only ones with information that is fun to share and also can bring a smile to your face about birds. And that really gives you a sense of what today's event's about. We're not here to give you a lecture. We're here to really celebrate alongside you about all the cool things that birds are doing this time of year, to gain a broader appreciation for what those birds are doing and how we can play like a really positive role in those animals' lives, and then also to feel inspired. These kinds, I always come away from these events feeling just energized, both by my colleagues here and by just seeing the great things that are being shared in chat. So if you see me looking off screen, it's because I have like 10 screens here and I want to not miss a single chat, but I have to listen and make sure I hear everything in our talk too. So thank you guys for sharing yourselves with us today and also sharing with the joy. So let's kick this off. I'm going to reshare my screen. Okay, so you guys should see a screen that says summer birding favorites. And really, this first part of the presentation, we're going to just share a few cool things that we can think of about this time of year that hopefully you'll find interesting and also maybe give you some opportunities to explore around where you live. So this first slide, I'm going to introduce because it's one thing that we've talked about a lot in our last couple live events, and that is like the immense amount of sound the birds make. Dawn chorus. Dawn chorus is going to start kind of going away as we move through the breeding season, as birds begin to focus on other things than just advertising. So now's a great time to get out still and hear these birds. And I don't know if anybody here in the Zoom with me has heard any performances lately, or in my case, I feel like I wake up to a couple every once in a while if I have the windows open.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this bird. It's one of my favorites when I go for hikes in my woods. I have some woods in my backyard, and this little singer is so distinct. You can pick it out amongst many of the other birds that are singing in the morning.
Yeah, I just think they're lovely. Um, and little birds are the ones that we often think of, but there's a bunch of bigger birds that have come back too. And this next one is a real treat. And we're gonna play this clip, listen for this bird in this video, and just enjoy just how beautiful they are. And I know, Ileana, you had mentioned something about birding around water. This is a bird that you see a lot around freshwater ponds, brackish streams. You can see them in lots of places. Um,
Yeah, during the summer, I feel like we find ourselves around bodies of water a lot to cool down, whether it's a river or a lake, or I personally like going to the beach. And it's such a great opportunity to see herons, egrets, all sorts of shorebirds if you're in those areas as well. And new sites. And so they're enjoying these spaces as much as we are. And I really enjoy being able to see birds and bring my binoculars along, although sometimes I forget because going to the beach is my main objective. But it's also fun to play with people who you're with on vacation too.
well, I just noticed somebody, Elizabeth in the YouTube chat, mentioned that she has a green heron nesting outside their window. And I don't know, Becca, you had mentioned having some herons near you as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love that the association with this bird is wetlands because that was my association too. But I live at least a quarter to a half a mile from any kind of a wetland. We do have wetlands on my property. And this bird will always hold a special place in my heart because about 5 or 6 years ago, my husband's son and I heard this and we could not figure out what it was. This was like right before Merlin's sound ID took off, and we were trying to solve this mystery. And we went to this line of spruce trees that we could tell it was in the spruce, and we were just drastically trying to like flip through, listen to sounds. What is this bird? And then we looked up and we saw all of this white scat, basically bird poop, coming down from this tree. And then we saw this little baby white fluff ball that looked like something out of like the Dark Crystal movie or something, looking down at us. And we realized they were green herons, like nesting way far away from any kind of a wetland right there in our blue spruce tree line. And it's magic. Every year they return, and we usually have anywhere from 2 to 3 pairs that nest it's right along our driveway where our blue spruce are. And they're such a delight. And it was real good learning for me to be like, wow, they don't necessarily nest right next to where they're foraging. They fly down to the creek multiple times a day. We watch them from the back patio, but they don't have to nest right near their water source.
That's pretty cool. And also it's just neat what we think of as their habitat is it's probably more complicated than what we first, kind of connect them to. Um, Similarly, when you walk out into the forests this time of year, especially in eastern deciduous forest, um, there are some birds, we talk about the dawn chorus starting to go away. There's some birds that don't pay attention to the fact that the dawn chorus is kind of going away this time and they sing. So check out this red-eyed vireo. And so, is that a sound any of you recognize from woodlands around you?
I certainly do. You can hear this bird all summer long, and that's one of the things I love about it is that their nests are relatively easy to find because the birds sing so consistently, even in the middle of the day when the weather's quite warm. One of the things I love about red-eyed vireos is that they're an understory nester, so they can nest pretty close to the ground, and it's very common to find them even at eye level. And so that makes them a really fun species to study and to be able to observe at a close level.
I think they can also be a great bird if you're going out this time of year and you don't know what a red-eyed vireo sounds like. Um, Listen to a recording a couple times and walk out there. There's just fewer birds singing, and so sometimes it makes it easier because it kind of sticks out. Of course, you don't have to be out in a wildlife preserve to see birds. That's one of the amazing things about them. They exist often all around us. And so in this case, we're right in somebody's backyard in this shot. And check out this energetic little guy. I find them so full of energy and so entertaining to watch. Anybody out there in the audience, you probably recognize this bird as a wren with his little tail. Let us know if you got wrens in your yard. We love them. House wrens are amazing, and we have a nest box, which we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to give you some ideas about nest boxes a little later in this talk. But one of the great things is that they will come nest in your backyard, right, Robyn?
That's right. These birds are super fun and common and easy to attract with the nest box. One of the things I enjoy about them is, of course, that bubbly song that we just heard. It's loud, it's musical, it's happy. But they also are really spunky little birds. They're very tiny, but if you get close to their nest, they will scold you and let you know that you're near my nest. And they have so much personality and spunk that they're a really fun one to watch for lots of people across the backyard.
Yeah, we have them in my backyard as well, and they are such a delight to watch. They definitely make their presence known, and we saw an uptick in their presence once we put out or left some sticks in the backyard. So brush piles are an underrated habitat element. I recommend them.
I also love these birds because in their nesting habitat, at least, a lot of these birds will be sometimes year round. But if you're in a place where they arrive in the spring, they're one of the earlier arrivers with the first blooming kind of trees. And they're often seen foraging on the blooms of my Juneberry and my service berries. They're looking for those early emergent insects. So they're really a good sign that the blooms are starting, the insects are hatching, and nesting season isn't too far away.
And I think you mentioned this, Robyn, about their bubbly songs that we heard this bird in this video singing. I find that that song just travels through the environment really well. So if there's a house wren around, like you're going to hear them making noise. You're going to hear them singing, and like you might also hear them scolding and doing all these other things. But even on a bike ride, let's say, I can just pick out a wren like almost in every, decent sized yard, bubbling away if it's the right time of the year where they're counter singing a bunch. And it's just really entertaining to think of the little social lives they're leading, and just how rich and complex they are. It's really exciting.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And we've talked a little bit about the dawn chorus starting to go away, but there's still some birds that sing. We talked about the race to get back and breed and early arrivers like these house wrens getting going in these nest boxes. But then we also have some birds that kind of take a different tack. So let's watch this American goldfinch for a moment, and then we can talk a little bit about their breeding strategy. So I don't know if you can tell, Becca, what that bird's foraging on.
Yeah, I was just talking about it. It's a service berry, Juneberry.
And these birds follow a different path, right, Robyn, than most of the birds that we're talking about.
That's right. They are vegetarian, so they actually breed a little bit later because they need those berries and seeds to already be in the landscape so that they can feed them to their young. So they want to have as many seeds and asters and fruits available. So they're actually going to start nesting later than most of our other birds. So we still have plenty of opportunities to look for their nests, especially in late June and throughout July and August. And I've been monitoring their nests even as late as mid-August. So they kind of extend the nesting season and give us another species to look forward to late in the summer.
And they're just spectacular looking birds, right? Especially if you watch them all winter long, just become these iconic plumaged birds. Um, I also think, in watching this clip again, I have it bigger on my screen than I have had it in the past. It really looks like the bird's not that interested in the berries, but it's interested in the seeds inside there, which kind of also gets to that point where they really are seed specialists, which until I had had it blown up as big as I have right now, I hadn't really noticed just how carefully it seemed to be picking away um, inside that berry there. Um, I've been hopefully people are chatting okay in both of our environments. We had a couple little snafus off screen, but I think everything's back to normal. I want to take a quick break right here to just, in case anybody came in late, I want to just um, let you know you're in the right place. You are in this wonderful, fun, support birds all summer long live online event, and we're just getting started. Hopefully you walked in and got to enjoy some of the videos we were just watching of some fun summer type birding experiences that are around. If you're looking for something else to do when you're out, some other thing to focus your brain on, take a listen and you can look for some of these things we're talking about. Um, I'm Charles Eldermire, live media producer at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I'm sharing the stage today with three other people from the Lab of Ornithology. Robyn Bailey, the project leader for Nestwatch, Becca Rodomsky-Bish, the project leader for Garden for Birds, and Ileana Betancourt, my colleague in communications and marketing. And we're all excited about birds. And so we hope that you now, if you did come in late, you realize you are in the right spot. It's been really fun reading through people's um, comments and things that they're sharing over here in the chat. That's why I'm looking off screen because everybody's just got a bunch of cool experiences and from all over the world. So um, just really neat. Thank you for sharing. We're going to try and work through the rest of this conversation today, giving you some other tips and resources to hopefully give you lots more choices, widen your portfolio of ways to make your world rich and involve birds. So you've had enough of my giant head probably talking at this point. So let me find my share screen again. It just always moves around. You'd think after 6 years of doing this, we'd get more efficient.
I just want to comment. It's great to see all the love for wrens in the chat from people across the country and around the world. They're definitely sweet little birds.
And they're a really widely distributed bird, right? So you can see different kinds of wrens in different places, but they all seem to share that spunk that little house wren seem to share. So to kick off this section, I want to bring Robyn back to center stage. And we've talked about Project Nestwatch, but this might give you a sense of why Robyn's here today, because she is a true expert voice when it comes to breeding birds.
Yeah, so just to share a little bit with you about what I do here at the lab, I manage the Nestwatch project, which is a free participatory science project that people all around the country and increasingly all around the world are contributing to. And we've been keeping this project going for the last 50 years. So we have lots of great data about nesting birds submitted by the public. Which is awesome. It's supported so much research and really enables us to kind of dive into how we as people can support the birds that are nesting near us. And so with that, you'll find resources on Nestwatch that will help you report nests to Nestwatch, learn how to support them. For example, with nest boxes, we have many different nest box plans for that house wren or bluebirds or other species that you might be interested in supporting in your yard, and all kinds of great information on our website. But one of the things that people often ask is, well, how do I find a nest? I would love to do Nestwatch, but it's so hard to find a nest. So we've put together some tips for things to keep an eye out for to help you see if there's a bird nesting near you. And so one of those things is to watch for birds with a mouthful of something. So I love this American robin busily collecting grass for the nest. Just so cute to see this.
I know I've seen robins like this that maybe have 3 times that much stuff that can barely get off the ground.
Yeah, they'll really stuff their beak full of nesting material and then kind of keep an eye on where they're going and see where are they going to build that nest. And it's not only grass like this. There are many other nesting materials. I know Becca, you've seen other birds in your garden carrying various nest materials, so you just always want to keep an eye out for seeing that behavior.
And I think the one important thing here is these are things that are probably happening around all of you wherever you're watching from. And so just by even being like, oh yeah, they're going to need to pick up stuff for their nest. That's something if you file it away, you're more likely your brain's going to be like, oh, I should watch for that. And just subconsciously, even out of the corner of your eye, your brain might clue you in on something that looks like that, right? And then hopefully then you get to follow along and see a really neat animal behavior.
I tend to see them pull out the twine in my garden for their nests
Mhm.
earlier in the season. Yeah. And then something that comes up that I hear people asking is should we put out nesting materials for birds? Is that something that's helpful, whether it's animal hair or anything else?
Yeah, the great thing about birds is that they're super resourceful and they can find and gather these nest materials really without our help. Um, and so there's no real need to put out nesting materials for birds. If you would really like to witness them gathering some nest materials, you could gather some clean feathers or strips of grass like the robin was collecting or twigs and just put them out near your bird feeders and see if anybody takes them. But we don't really need to put that out. Birds are really great at finding things, even surprising things that you might not think of, like snake skin and spider webs. They're really great at finding those things on their own.
Cool. That's great. That
And
reminds me, I saw a hummingbird starting to pick at spider web on a bush right outside my house. That was really fun to see.
yeah, it's just one of those things. If you've never built a nest, you don't realize how much of the world out there is just kind of like great nest building material, depending on what kind of nest you want to build and how big a bird you are. And so it's actually it's almost more interesting to see to try and view it through that bird's lens. Like, what in my yard might they make, for to use for a nest? And you could work on setting up your yard in such a way that it's got a lot of those things or things that you've seen in nests, which is maybe something we're going to talk about in a little bit too. Um, let's move to the next.
And kind of along these similar lines, if you see a bird with something in its bill, watch where it goes. It may not be nest material. It could be food, like in this example. They may also carry away a little bit of poop in the form of a fecal sac, so you could see that. So always keep an eye out if a bird is carrying something, see where they're going.
And I think, one cool part about that is once a bird's on a nest, they're going to keep going back and forth to it, and
Exactly.
so it can be an incremental process, right? Where you don't have to see everything all at once, right? Like when you find a nest, Robyn, how would you normally describe that process?
Great question. It generally starts with those earlier behaviors like a bird singing in an area, kind of claiming its territory. Then you might see the nest material being carried back and forth. That might get you to a general area. If you miss those, that's fine. You still have an opportunity to find a nest. I just found a nest or saw this cool behavior of a red-winged blackbird flying past me the other day with a mouth full of tiny insects, and I watched where it was going. It's like, oh, there's the nest over there. And then once you kind of hone in on the area where they seem to keep repeatedly coming to, it's just a matter of time before you'll find it.
I have a pair of this particular gray catbird species that are nesting right out front my door where there's a large shrubby area. And they are one of my favorite birds. They follow me around my gardens all growing season long. They're so curious. I would say they're up there with a love of house wrens for sure, for me particularly. And for those of you who love to garden, you will be happy to know I have a species of plant that's in the viburnum family, and I have a very challenging problem with the viburnum leaf beetle, which is an invasive insect that tends to go after viburnums. And this family of catbirds this year has eliminated my problem. They eat so many caterpillars that it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all day long, picking off all of the little soft, fat protein rich little nuggets there. And it's wonderful. Usually I have to kind of go out and manually do this work every year to try to keep the problem under control, but no, the catbirds got it covered this year.
What a relief. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Now you just have to like work on a long-term contract with those catbirds and see
Yeah.
see what motivates them. So we've talked about watching birds with stuff in their bills, and there's an obvious reason for that, right? Because if there's going to be a nest, eventually you might be able to find where their nest is by following them. But there's one more tip that Robyn brought up for us.
Yeah, this one is a great one because it's not necessarily the case that you need to see them. You can also listen for nests. And I love this clip because I just found a nest almost exactly like this 2 days ago here in Sapsucker Woods, just by listening. And you'll hear in just a second what I heard.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of incessant begging call of nestlings, particularly woodpeckers, that will draw you in. So you can play it, we'll hear that sound. And they'll just keep doing that all day. So hearing that, if you stop and look around, there's a good chance you can find a nest by following that sound. I love these birds.
They're so funny.
They're really cute.
And to think at what they become, these gigantic, majestic, uh, you know, woodpeckers. I can remember as a young person going on a quest in the middle of winter to try and find my first pileated woodpecker. And just to see them when they're young is just like it's a nice contrast between these like sleek, well put together, like highly evolved, purposeful looking animals, right? To something that looks a little bit more like this. And so this is a bird that's supposed to be out of the nest right now, right? And we're gonna talk through what's going on here and how you can have some tips on how to identify a fledgling, which is what this bird is. But does anybody want to take a guess on what this bird species is? Because one additional tip that we don't really cover on the next slide is that they don't always look like the adults. So yeah, so this is an eastern towhee. And they spend a lot of their time on the ground even when they can fly. But Robyn, I don't know if you want to talk us through these features of a fledgling that really help you pick apart from going from an adult bird to a young bird that's supposed to be out of the nest but isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, so we can break down the features of a fledgling, I like to call it. What are some things that you should look for to know this bird is a fledgling? So open eye is a great one because if their eyes are fully open, they are responsive and they can be reacting with their environment. That's always a good sign. Also, we can look for the visible gape flanges at the very corners of the mouth. These are often brightly colored. In this case, we can see like a yellow patch of what looks like softer skin. This can be red, it can be like a pale white color, but it'll be a little bit conspicuous, and that'll tell you that you're looking at a recently fledged bird. Of course, we can see this bird has some well-developed feathers, but there are still a few downy tufts of that natal down sticking out on the top of the head, which I love. It's a great, adorable giveaway. Also notice the short tail on this bird. It's just tiny, it's barely even there. And the upright posture, this bird is able to sit up and perch. And so all of those things together can tell us that we're looking at a fledgling that is making its way into the world.
And we have gotten a couple of questions in the chat about, as you might imagine, it's a question that comes in a lot this time of year. What should I do if I find a bird out of the nest? And I think if you could you've just described this bird that should be out of the nest. How would you contrast a bird that maybe there was an accident and there's something that you should do about it? What situation would somebody be walking into if that were the case versus this bird's out there, let them live their life like this little fledgling?
Yes, exactly. Let's start with that. If you see a baby bird that looks like this and it's not in any immediate danger, or doesn't seem to be injured, you don't need to do anything at all. The parents are most likely nearby or gathering food for it. They still depend on the parents after they fledge. So you don't need to do anything. This bird is meant to be on the ground, and a lot of fledglings will find themselves on the ground. But there can be some cases where you might find a nestling, which is not yet fledged, which could look less developed than this, so less feathers, eyes may not be open completely, not able to sit upright or hold its own posture standing up. And if you see that, that's an indication that you've probably found a nestling. And if it seems like the bird is uninjured and you can find a nest, you can put that baby bird back in the nest. If you're not sure if it's injured or you can't find a nest, then the best thing to do would be to call a wildlife rehabilitator to ask for advice. And always call first before picking up a baby bird, just to make sure that that's the advice that they would give you. And if they can help you, maybe they can even help over the phone.
That's a great, hopefully that helps people in chat. There really is a big distinction between the two. And the thing is, even when they look like this fun little towy fledgling here, they're just very capable little animals at that point. This is if you sit and watch, if you ever get lucky enough to see a fledgling in your yard and watch what it can do, they can often climb up near vertical surfaces. They can book it across the yard pretty fast. They can make a lot of noise to get their parents' attention. And these are all parts of them growing into their adulthood. And so we have this fun next clip just to see a fledgling in action. All right, so let's watch these guys. So what I love about this, I'm just going to bring it back to a shot here of the adult and the youngsters there. Um, like you could talk through the things that Robyn just described on that last slide, right? So what do you see differences between this adult bird here and these young birds that are out on there? And you could tick off the things that Robyn just mentioned. What do you guys see?
Well, I can tell you that I just saw one of my first cedar waxwing fledgling of the year on Sunday, and it looked exactly like this, but it was giving these very short, kind of clumsy flights, but it was getting away from me. It was living its life, so I didn't need to do anything. It just was making its way. Probably first or second day out of the nest.
Wow. And as Robyn had mentioned, you can see stubby little tails, those little yellow tipped tails on these guys, little short wings. Look at the shape of that wing compared to the shape on that adult. And just how well put together that adult looks and sleek. I mean, waxwings are particularly sleek, I suppose, but those youngsters just look more disheveled. And I think go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's always fun when you see the baby bird to guess what the parent is, because they have the plumage that's kind of reminiscent of the adult, but not quite there. Like as we've been sitting here today, I saw a family of baby bluebirds that are in my backyard sitting down. And the other day I just saw them for the first time, and the tail is so blue, but the rest of the body is kind of speckled. And so it's just cool to see the alterations of what the babies look like versus the adult. So yeah, that slightly off look is fun. And then the movements, they're kind of trying to balance, or they're flitting around and calling, trying to get attention. Is definitely distinct.
And I mean, so a few people in the chat I noticed when they were guessing what that image was of that towy nestling or fledgling on the earlier slide. Like sometimes those birds can evoke other birds. A few people said wren when they saw it. They saw a small kind of dumpy bird with maybe a little tail. It's actually a pretty good guess, but it's not actually a wren, right? And by sitting and watching, if you notice a bird that doesn't look quite right, especially in this summer kind of birding period, you might be looking at a fledgling, and that's a cool thing to sit around and watch in a different way, because that bird's going to act different than you expect it to, and that adult's probably going to come and feed it, like in this clip. You can figure out who it is. They also make different weird noises, which I didn't include a clip in here of like listening to a young wren or a young song sparrow kind of experiment with their song. That's another part of these young birds being out in the environment. You're going to hear things that sound different in the same way that these young birds look different, which is pretty cool. All right. And so one thing that's new this year that we're really excited about is something that Robyn was heavily involved with. And I don't know if you mind telling a little bit about this, Robyn.
Yeah, so we just released a new online course in collaboration with Bird Academy called The Hidden World of Nests and Eggs. And if you like learning more about breeding birds and you'd like to learn more about the nesting cycle and how cute baby birds, make their way in the world, this course will dive deeper into nesting biology, breeding behaviors, parenting choices, and all that and more. So I encourage you to check this out.
And everyone who has registered for this event will get a 50% off coupon code. So stay tuned in your email after this event.
That's right. And I think if you've enjoyed, for example, looking at some of the fun clips we've been watching in this, and instead of having a motley crew of people comment about them, have like something a little bit nicer looking and sounding, probably, to give more context and information about what you're seeing. I think that's a great environment where you can really slow down and experiencing that on a time scale longer than a 1 hour live event. So really, if you like the visual and audio things that we're doing, Bird Academy does an incredible job bringing these things to life. Awesome. Well, before we move to our next section, I'm just going to pop out of the share here for a moment. Um, I want to thank Robyn for sharing some really good tips. I hope that people understand that these are like starter ways for you to get out and hopefully learn more about the birds that are breeding around you, right? But there's a natural place to take that if you enjoy watching these breeding birds, right? And Robyn is the leader of an entire project that kind of helps you help the scientific world learn about the birds in your backyard. Um, so can you mention the website again, Robyn? And is there a time when people need to sign up by or anything like that?
Good question. Yeah, the website is nestwatch.org. We also have a mobile app, so you can download that and you'll be prepared when you find a nest. As I mentioned, some nests have already fledged, but there are plenty of others still building, laying eggs, and that it will fledge several months from now, like those goldfinches. So it's never too late to join. So I'd encourage you to take a look and sign up if you're interested and join one of the world's largest volunteer scientist teams and help us learn more about nesting birds. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Robyn. Well, we're kind of going to shift gears right now more into Becca's neck of the woods, um, and try and also provide you not just with some cool ways to watch birds, but potentially some ways that you can make the spaces around you be even better for birds, really transform them so that birds love them even more. So, Becca, I don't know if you want to give an introduction to the Garden for Birds project.
Sure, I'd love to. So, Garden for Birds is a relatively new project. We've only been around a couple of years, and it's a really fun group of folks that are actively engaged in trying to create spaces in and around wherever they live to better support birds. I saw several comments about people saying they see birds eating their seed heads, caterpillars on their plants. These are all really good signs, right? These are signs that we're actually creating biodiverse spaces around our homes, and birds really benefit from this. All of the food web benefits from this. And one of the things that's key to your success is planting native plants that are found in your ecoregion, and that, thrive in the soils and the conditions that you live in. Even if you're just planting on a patio or a porch, right? There are plants that will do better in your area. And so this project's all about sort of helping to guide people in what kind of plants to add, what kind of bird-friendly features besides plants that you can add, and then really sharing our stories and our experiences. People submit their photos. We have people share narratives about the types of things that they're seeing and they're doing in and around their properties. We have webinars throughout the summer, kind of like this one, to help support people. And we're creating lots of resources, like you can see here depicted on the screen. I saw somebody ask about hummingbirds. We have a new resource that's all about native plants to all across the US and Canada, which is what this project focuses on, that will help feed and support hummingbirds. And we have ideas for containers as well as plants that you want to put right in your garden. So it's a fun project. We really, the birds can use all the help that they can get. And moving away from sort of an ornamental, non-native landscape to a more native landscape is just going to attract way more birds and biodiversity to your property.
Well, and I think one interesting thing that people may not realize is that making a place better for birds doesn't always need to only involve gardening, right? There's different ways to go about it, different ways to start, different steps. And so these next few slides are going to walk you through a few ways to approach it with different varying levels of sort of investment, but also ways to kind of chip away at this idea
Mm.
of you can make the world around you a better place for birds. So let's go to the next slide here. And I love this one, Becca, because it wasn't even something that I was thinking about, but then you said this, this very thing is one of the first things that people can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Add water. Even if you're not, some people don't like to garden. That's completely understandable. But if you have even just a little porch or a balcony, you will be surprised by who will show up if you just put even a small, shallow dish of water out. This is obviously a quite an elaborate water feature. Somebody who has more space, which is wonderful. But some people will just use, I often recommend the drip trays of a planter, and they're nice and shallow. You don't want to put out deep water in case the bird stumbles. You want it to be able to get itself out safely. I always recommend, like this demonstrates, put rocks or sticks in your water feature so that if pollinators, which are sure to also find it as well as the birds, if they kind of stumble around in the water a little bit, they have an escape route to try to make sure that they can get out of that water if they have a mishap. So water is one of the easiest go-to things. I saw somebody in the chat asked about heat waves. This is an excellent thing to do for birds, right? During those hot periods in our any time of year, but a lot of us experience them in the summer. Put some water out. You would be surprised at how grateful they will be. And one of my favorite things about my personal water feature that I put in recently, a newer one, is that birds will discover it. And they don't always realize that you know it's there too. So I'll be sitting outside and the birds will show up to it sometimes for the first or second time and they're like, this is great. And they'll look at you and they'll be like, is this safe? Can I feed here? And sometimes it takes them a little while, but before you know it, you're just sitting there and minding your own business, drinking your morning cup of coffee, and the birds are enjoying the water. And I think like subtly, they're sort of sending me a message that they're grateful for it, especially in the hot days of summer.
And let's not forget they can give you a smile while
Yeah.
you're doing it. Watch this, PJ.
I forgot to say they love it for bathing too. Absolutely. You might get a bath party while you sit in the morning.
I have a
Yeah,
rock that consistently comes to my backyard bird bath, and it muddies the waters each time, which is a good reminder to clean it out regularly. But it has been fun to have them. I have one fancy backyard bird bath that was probably like $60 at the garden store. But then I also went to the thrift shop and picked up a couple shallow dishes that work just as well that I have in two other places around my yard, and the birds love it. I have one outside my window too. That helps give a nice brain break during the workday.
and let's not forget having again setting up a place for birds to enjoy more means they might be more likely to nest to make use of all the stuff we've already been talking about before, right? Or that water feature there might be mud by that water feature that then becomes a thing that they're going to use for their nest, right? So it's sort of it's all connected, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Lots of great questions really quick before we pivot about bird baths. I forgot to mention this, but make sure that you do keep your water real clean. And people sometimes worry about attracting mosquitoes and so forth. If you empty that water bath, if it's like a stagnant space, within a week, it disrupts mosquito cycles. You're not going to have mosquitoes nesting in it or, yeah, producing larvae in it. And make sure that you're kind of scouring that water bath once a week at least to just kind of keep it clean and fresh for the birds. And you don't need a deep one, like maybe 2 inches at the most. You want these bird baths to be relatively shallow. And yeah, birds will show up. It doesn't really matter the size of your bird bath. Obviously, the bigger the bird bath, the more birds can be enjoying it at once. If it's a smaller bird bath, it'll probably be like a single visitor that you see.
Are
It's
you
sort of like, go
and you
ahead.
see some interesting interactions? Like I had a bluebird that also just liked to plop down in the middle, and a couple others would come and visit. The finches would come, and there'd be all these interesting interactions amongst them.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar if you've ever thought about buying a hot tub or getting a pool. You want to think about how many friends you want to have with you and how much maintenance you want to do, right? And so maybe start small and build up, right? But speaking of starting small,
Hmm.
there's also another approach. Let's watch this Allen's hummingbird. This you don't even need a yard necessarily to start making a difference. Let's see.
Ugh, those wings are so incredible.
Yeah, it's really special to be able to watch their little tongue zoom in
Hmm.
and out. And so
Yeah,
you'd
and this
mentioned,
this is a plant that does really well in containers. This is a plant mostly in the Southwest, California. It's native to a scarlet sage. Hummingbirds love this particular plant. They love tubular flowers in general, and red is definitely one of the colors. There's actually some recent research that was published from somebody who analyzed iNaturalist photos and was able to document through research that that hummingbirds as they migrate are actually following the bloom of red flowers in the spaces that they're native to. So we've actually been able to link the migration and movement of hummingbirds to the types of flowers they tend to prefer and favor, which I think is it's kind of a logical thing we've all witnessed if we've been growing for hummingbirds, but it's fun to see that we're actually aligning research and science with it too.
oh, that's amazing. Um, I don't know if people out in the chat have container plants that they've really enjoyed seeing birds come to. Every year we plant some little red salvias right outside our window for the hummingbirds to come to, and it's just so neat to even watch their wings as their wings are moving. Like you can see the other parts of the plants, like basically being blown by the downdraft from their wings. It's just they're just such incredible little creatures that to get to watch them up close is really cool. And having something that they want right there makes it seem, not so transactional. It's very just we're all just enjoying the same space together, which
Mhm.
which I love. Let's see what we got next.
Mm.
So we've talked about adding things straight away. We talked about adding some container plants, adding some water features, but there's one step back from that too, where you can maybe start if you're not quite ready for diving into the water feature.
Yeah, a lot of people who are kind of thinking, I would like to do some more for birds. I need to go outside and figure out how exactly I'm gonna integrate some of these changes with what I already have. These will give you some ideas here. These are actually photos from Garden for Birds participants. As I said, we share a lot of imagery together to help inspire inspiration and to kind of hold ourselves accountable to what we're doing. This one picture you can see has a multi-stage sort of shrinking of their lawn happening, right? So they kind of have a shrub. One year they decided to sort of expand the lawn, add a set of perennials, and then they're continuing that sort of every year. I really recommend that. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Start small. Start with one little corner and expand as you go. The middle picture is a really fun one because they have a couple of spaces. They have a planter, and then you notice they have a bird feeder there. And they're thinking, what if I just spread some seeds underneath these resources that I knew birds are going to be visiting anyway? That's a great strategy. Bird feeders that have growth underneath them, shrubs, perennials, etc., are going to provide a little more safety to birds. They're going to feel a little more comfortable moving in and taking a good use of those feeders. And it also provides resources, right? So we can feed birds beyond just feeders. We can actually feed them with native habitat. And then that final picture I love too, because this person has some gardens, but this is something I like to do in my space too. Integrating containers within your garden space, right? So some of us have space. We can dig into the ground and add natives, but it's kind of fun to have container natives too. You can move them around. You can create different aesthetics, put them in different places, and I love to think of gardening not just for birds, but also for me, right? And making my spaces dynamic and colorful and transformative. And it keeps the birds guessing too. Sometimes I'll move plants on them and they'll show up, especially hummingbirds, and they'll be like, I swear there was a plant here. And then they have to go hunting for it and figure out where I've moved it. It's kind of a fun game.
Well, and I think that I wanted to include this, which is another graphic. It's an illustration from one of your participants. And what I
Hmm.
like about this personally, I'll let you talk about it, but I wanted to share what I like is it shows them removing stuff,
Hmm.
changing things. I don't get from when I look at this, I don't get an overwhelming feeling of I need to get everything right. I need to get it right now. I need to know what I want for the next 10 years. That's not what I get out of an illustration like this. I look at this and I go, oh, there's some stuff here. They want to put some different stuff in. They want to move some other things. And I don't know how often you're getting sort of like this level of like beautiful little illustration from your participants, but it's also pretty cool that somebody can, share, if they have an artistic bent, which I don't, that this is a way that you can also express yourself, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ileana was talking about how she's become more intentional about journaling and writing out and making plans in the gardening process. That is absolutely a fun piece of this puzzle, right? Gardens are not static. Anybody who's a gardener knows they're constantly growing, changing, evolving. Plants can handle being moved, especially if they're in a place they don't like. And as we learn more, right? I've definitely shifted and changed my gardening practices as I've learned more about what benefits wildlife in different ways. And so making changes is just a part of the adventure. And documentation is awesome. I will admit I'm not as good as Ileana with like writing things down. But it's a really fun practice to be able to sort of go back and look at how what you've done, what you're going to do, use it as a form of dreaming and visioning for the future too, which is this person is also doing.
I don't know, Philiana, if you want to just show, because you won't pop on screen until you talk.
Oh yeah. I've definitely planted plants like columbine in the sun and realized it didn't like the sun. Same with mountain laurel, which also didn't like the sun. And after a year, I realized how sad and wimpy it looked and moved into the shade, and now it's blossoming. So definitely a process. And I moved into my current house 3 years ago. It was all lawn, and I had major goals to try to reduce the lawn, 'cause that's a lot of work, but also make it friendly. And I planted over 50 native bushes and trees. And I have, it's hard to see because my background, you can't see it, can you? Darn. Um, but I have it all mapped out in a journal. And whenever I make updates, I add it, 'cause otherwise I forget what plants are out there. And it's helpful to know.
That's great. That's awesome. So I want to point out to everybody, we have about 3 minutes left here. I want to respect both our panelists' time and the people's time out there in the chat who hopefully you're cutting work for this. You've made this a priority, and we appreciate you spending that time with us. We've talked about this being bird habitat, but there's one thing we haven't specifically talked about outside of a couple of anecdotes that this bird habitat winds up being really good habitat for other things too, right?
Yeah. All, or not all, but about 96 to 98% of North American songbirds need native plants because of what are in the bills of all of these birds right here, right? They need insects. Most parents right now of North American songbirds, aside from goldfinches and some house finches and some other species, are feeding their young insects, predominantly caterpillars from moths and butterflies. And I did see somebody show concern in the chat about they like butterflies. They don't want them to be fed to birds, but that's just a part of the life cycle. And the numbers of eggs and caterpillars that exist if you have a native landscape is going to be far bigger than being worried about the birds eating them, because there's going to be more caterpillars than the birds can possibly feed to their offspring. So really, really, really important. This is the crux of why we need to create native landscapes for birds, is because in order to grow our bird populations, we need to have enough food for them to actually rear their young. And this is such a beautiful image that Charles put together of you can just get a sense here of the diversity of types of birds, and the diversity of the types of insects that they're looking for and trying to forage in. So insects are a good thing. Even those of you that maybe get a little squirmy about it, the birds are going to take care of them for you, and creating those kind of ecological balances in our backyard where the birds and the butterflies and the insects and so forth can coexist together is my ultimate goal in creating my garden spaces for sure.
That's perfect. A perfect sort of like summary of where we're trying to go with all of this. I want to make sure that those in the audience, again, if you've registered, we're going to be sending you resources via email so that you can stay connected and also get the chance to learn about all these things. Get the chance to understand how you can sign up for Garden for Birds, join Nestwatch, enroll in the Bird Academy course, as well as potentially get a coupon to anybody that's registered for that course, and potentially even we're giving out 2 free courses to attendees that are going to be randomly selected. So I want to give a shout out to these things. And as we hit the top of the hour, I want to thank everybody out there in the audience for coming. The fact that you guys are interested in this makes it really exciting for us to keep doing these things. I also want to thank the people that are here in the Zoom with me. And I don't know if there's anything any of you want to say before we kind of like start to log off here, but give you a chance to give any last thoughts to the audience.
I'll just say that birds are incredible. They're fun to watch. They're fun to have and live amongst. And being able to garden and support them is really special. And when we do it as a larger community, that's really powerful and empowering too. So kudos to everyone who plants a native in their yard, even if it's just one.
And you're not just growing those insects, which are food for baby birds, but nesting materials like those dead leaves, grasses, moss, mud, all that great stuff that birds will use for their nests. So, yeah. And they also eat mosquitoes and spiders too, right, Becca?
That's right.
Not just butterflies.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll just say, this is fair warning. This is very addictive, folks. The minute you start planting for birds and seeing all this stuff in your yard, watch out. It
Yeah.
becomes a whole little adventure, and there'll be a new nesting bird the following year. I guarantee it.
Yeah, if you could remember your joy seeing that bird you wanted to see for the first time, or just discovering that you enjoyed birds, and now laminate that to I created this spot and the birds are crushing it. They love it here. How good that makes you feel, makes me feel good. And so if you like, I want to thank you guys again, thank the audience again, and remind you if you like learning about birds like this, if you like these kinds of programs that are supporting you having a deeper relationship with birds and the world around you, please consider supporting the lab. You can donate online. You can become a member. You can sustain us for a long time. I know it kind of sounds like NPR right now, but really, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology could not do what it does with the freedom that we have without people like you in the audience who support us. So thank you to everyone out there who does support us. Thank you to everybody out there that loves birds. And thank you to our panelists here for just like giving us a lot to think about. I'm excited to go outside and watch birds right now. I'm gonna go look for somebody with some nest material, I think.
Thanks, Charles.
Welcome
Thank
too.
you.
That's perfect. Take care, everyone. Thank you for coming and have a great summer.